Good morning. How's everybody feeling? We awake and all that? Yeah. I always, at this point at camp is the time where you've already have some remember when stories where years from now you'll say like, remember when Donnie thought he could eat all that butter and he got like 3 sticks in and then threw up all over his girlfriend and all that. It was like, I always love those. They're so ridiculous, and this is the only place where you will have stories like that. You've also discovered who that guy or that girl in the group is, and I've talked about them before. The person who is like never gets out of the house, and so they see this as their chance to not waste any time and not let you sleep, and they're just like, let's go, let's do it, let's do it, you know? It's like, okay, well, we're not going to room with you next year. How about that? It's a special time. But hey, it's Father's Day, which is awesome. I'm a dad, so I'll be FaceTiming my girls later. There's lots of dads in the room, but on Father's Day, I always think about my dad. Now, my dad is a very special person. He is a lot like me, so I like him a lot because I love me. But he's like the corniest, cheesiest man on the planet. He loved those Mountain Dew commercials back in the day, so he still does it. I'll call him this afternoon, he'll go, what's that? I'm like, okay, yeah, Dad, it never gets old. I love that. But he, when we would date people in high school, he would think it would be hilarious to do different stuff like the first couple interactions with him. So the first time I brought my girlfriend home, he pretended like he was in a coma. So he laid on the couch like this and just did not move. And my mom, she's like, just ignore him. And he just laid there. We were in the house for like 45 minutes. He didn't move a muscle. And so she's like, is he okay? I'm like, he's definitely not okay, but he's also not in a coma. One time my brother, this is so weird, I shouldn't tell you this. My brother brought his girlfriend home. My dad came down on one of my mom's dresses. To which we were like, what is happening? Like, I am not gonna turn out normal, which you guys have seen if you know me. It's like, this is gonna mess us up in the long term. So he like walked in the house and said, nope, and just walked right back out with her. He did some other stuff where I won't get into some of it because it's weird enough as it is. But I remember one day, Dad said, hey, let's go eat breakfast. And so in my small town, you either ate breakfast at McDonald's or at BP. So since they didn't have the hot dogs spinning on the hot dog warmer, we went to McDonald's. We sit down to breakfast, and, he's got his thing, I got mine. This was before the McGriddle and anything like that. So they do, like, the pancakes, which I'm sure the healthiest thing you could eat in the morning is a big stack of McDonald's pancakes where, like, the styrofoam has melted onto it for that extra. It's like the sweet and savory thing. But we sit down, and we're eating and all that, and he's being super weird, which is normal. So I'm thinking, all right, we're all good here. And he just kind of looks up at me and says, so, you know how everything works? To which I was like, yeah, we eat our food, we leave, talk as little as possible. How hard could this be? We do it all the time. He's like, no, I mean like how everything works. To which I'm like, I'm not picking up what you're laying down here. He's like, the birds and the bees stuff. I thought, nope, not at McDonald's, Dad. No, sir. This is the only restaurant in our town. People are gonna be coming and going. I don't know if you brought props. I don't know what's going on. No, sir. He's like, no, son, you're old enough now. It's important that we talk about this. I'm like, I agree it's important, but not with you. He's like, well, let me, I'll be mature about it. Just let me explain to you how everything works. I'm like, Dad, I'm 16 years old. I've got a pretty good idea how everything works. He's like, well, let me make sure. So he sat there at McDonald's and was telling me about the birds and the bees, which I think he botched it completely. I'm like, Dad, birds and bees, they don't sleep together. And you've got these birds and the bees going on dates and treating each other with respect. And then, when they get married, I'm like, this does not work for me. And I'm so awkward in the booth. I'm like, people can hear us. It's the weirdest thing. We had a friend come by, just say hi. And it's that moment where you feel like they know everything that you're talking about. And they're just saying hi to mess with you. And so I'm just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Had I known, I would not have come here. I'm so sorry. So we go through the whole talk and all of that, and it was the worst moment of my life. And I'm just so glad that it's over. I couldn't tell you a word he said, honestly, because I wasn't listening. But this morning, since I'm a dad and I will get to have conversations like that with my girls in the future, which I don't know how that's going to go, because contrary to what my brother told me growing up, I've never been a little girl, so I don't know what to tell them. So I thought I would practice this morning, and y'all can tell me what you think. Since I'm a dad, that's appropriate. So, everybody, you've got birds and bees, okay? I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, we are going to talk about what it means to have a pure heart this morning. I know it's tough in a morning session because it's like I'm barely even awake and all of that, but I hope that for the next 15, 20 minutes, you could engage in this, because it is one of the most important things to be talked about in life, not even just in high school. And I was talking to Brandon Coker, who plays drums, before about this talk and saying we're going to talk about sexual purity and stuff like that. He goes, bro, you need to call it the "Don't Be a Father's Day" message. I hope you get that. Some of you are like, oh, I get it. So well done, Brandon. I thought that was good. But here's the thing about any time we talk about purity, we talk about sex, we talk about sexual purity and all that, I know because I'm a human being and I grew up going to church, this is the 100% eye roll message. Then when I say, hey, we're going to talk about sexual purity, eyes roll in the back of the head like, here we go, okay. They just need to check off that box at camp. They need to say that they've talked about it, this and that. And the weirdest thing has happened in our culture, and the weirdest thing has happened in churches and in families, that we have all of this stuff that we'll talk about over here in this bucket, and then we've got all this other stuff which is in the sexuality realm, the sexual realm that's in this bucket. And that one we don't really explore that much, because like I experienced that day at McDonald's, it's awkward. It's uncomfortable. What do you say to not offend people, but to help people understand this is a serious, serious thing that we need to talk about? And a lot of you hate the talk because afterwards, your boyfriend or your girlfriend are going to make decisions that you're like, oh, great. I don't feel that way, but now it's like we've got to put up these boundaries and do this and that. So you get really mad at me because I'm taking away something that you like to engage in. And we don't like to hear it. Because for a lot of us in the room, it's not a big deal. And while you'd say, yeah, I'm not having sex, so what's the big deal? We kind of have this bucket of sexuality, and we say, well, we're going to put sex over here. And we'll say, yeah, we'll point to that and say, we're not having sex. But there's all this other stuff that we're engaged in. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it today, just to be honest with you. Because you're smart and you get it. And you live in the world where sex is rampant and things are going on. So I don't have to sit here and explain all the little things that I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about when I say sexual purity. You can check yourself. You don't need me to do that. So I'm not going to do that. But I do want to look at the life of David this morning around this idea of sexual purity, because what I always got frustrated with at camps and at church and all of that, they would point to these people in the Bible, and they would be people that lived a life that was so unattainable. And I would think, okay, have an open heart like David. Like, that's not as easy as you're saying it. It's fearless heart. Fear is a real thing, and while this will help me get there, but it's like, he's so far ahead of me. Have a vulnerable heart. Hopefully last night you stepped into the waters of vulnerability, and for a lot of you, I'm sure you're like, okay, this is going to take some time and practice. And we've been pointing to some of these incredible characteristics about David. But this morning, I'm not going to point specifically to that. I am a little bit at the end. But I want to talk about a big uh-oh moment that David had. Because I think it's important for us to see that David, like us, doesn't get it 100% right all the time. And I find it incredibly interesting that the area of his life that we can point to and go, yeah, that was a mistake. The area of his life where he writes a lot of his regretful psalms about and stuff like that is around this area of sexuality, of sexual purity. And so to catch you up to speed, last night we told you that David is getting famous. People are singing his praises. The king doesn't like it, trying to kill him. David's like on the run to get away from him. Let's fast forward down the road. Now David is king. And so now he's the guy. He gets the crown. And so we're going to jump into 2 Samuel chapter 11 where we read this story. It says, one evening, David got up from his bed and walked around the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. So we start here. David's walking around the top of his house, the palace, and he sees a naked woman bathing, and it catches his attention. because he is a human being, a man who can breathe. So obviously he's like, oh, there's a naked woman. And so the woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. And so David initially sees this woman, and he's curious. You know, he's got that, like I said, he's a man, very visually takes everything in, is stimulated visually. He sees this naked woman, and so his interest peaks. He's like, okay, I'd like to know more about this. This happens to guys in this room when they're on Instagram or when they're at the beach or when they're at school and they see a girl who's probably not naked, maybe whatever you're looking at, she is, and it's like interest peaks. And now it's like, oh, I want to know more. I'm going to click on her profile. I've seen one picture. I want to see all of them. So he has that interest now because he's seen it. The man said that David asked about her. She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam and the wife of Uriah, the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her. So he's like, oh, okay. Go get her. But here's the thing that always interests me about this. David just finds out that she's married and not available. So it's like, yeah, she's this guy's wife, so she's off limits. And his next response is to go, okay, go get her. Which I go, whoa, wait. Why was that your response? And for me, the reality is that David, when he saw this woman on top of the other roof, had already made the decision where this was going to go. Some of you do the same thing. When you see that picture, that thing, you've already made the decision where this is going to end up. And so for him, when he hears all this stuff, it's just information. It doesn't matter. For some of you, when I'm talking about this stuff, it's just information. It doesn't matter to you. Because in your heart, you've already made the decision where you're willing to go and what you're willing to do. And so you get so frustrated when the actions don't line up with the label Christian, and it's like, I keep struggling with this thing and I can't shake it, and you get so frustrated with it, but when I'm talking, it's just information because you've already decided where you're gonna go and what you're going to do. As did David. So they send for her, and she came to him and he slept with her. Then she went back home. Gosh, that is the narrative of so many relationships. He loves me. Yes, I'll have sex with him because he loves me. I'll send him this picture because he loves me. And then it's like the relationship gets rocky, and what happens? He sends her home. That's it. I got what I wanted. On to the next one. It's like, wait a minute. Oh, what was all of that? Like, was that not love? Did my heart just lie to me? Yes, it did. It completely led you astray. And so it says that David sleeps with her, sends her back home. Thank you very much. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, I am pregnant. And sometimes it takes, maybe not that extreme, but it takes that for us to go, maybe I should live this life a little bit differently. Maybe I should clean this up a little bit. The church as a whole, when I was growing up, did an incredible disservice to me. I don't blame them. I love the church I grew up in. My dad was the pastor of the church, but I remember sitting in camps and sitting there every Sunday that they would talk about sexual purity. And I would hear the message and they would say, don't have sex. Don't look at pornography. Don't do this. Don't do that. And so in my head, I was like black and white, right and wrong. Got it. Oh, but then something would happen and I'd fail and I'd be like, what does that say about me? I'm not the Christian I thought I was. God, I gotta make my way all the way back to you. I've fallen so far back, all of this. There was so much guilt, so much pain. And the more pressure that put on me, the more don't do this, don't do that, they said, the more weight I felt, the harder it was to accomplish that goal. And so this morning, I want to point out that that is not the message I'm giving you. Yeah, stay away from that stuff, absolutely. But I want to get your attention off the action stuff, and I want to get your attention onto your heart. Because like we talked about last night, stopping things at the surface only works in that moment. Guess what? There's more coming because it's being initiated from a different place other than just your actions. David eventually learned this. David eventually learned that I've got to do something different because now this girl is pregnant and I've got all this stuff that I'm going to have to do, which Reed is going to talk about tonight, but I've got to make some changes. And so I assume David thought about purity. What does that mean? And in Psalm, before I get to that, sorry, I got off track. So David thought about purity. And as he's thinking about it, he's realizing that I have won a lot of battles, I've won a lot of wars, I've gotten a lot of stuff right. But now, all of a sudden, I messed up in this sexual realm. which for us is kind of the thing. For me, it was that way. I don't drink. I don't smoke weed. I don't do any of this stuff. But it came to this sexual bucket over here that's awkward to talk about in your small group and with each other. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, I'm working on that. That's that. And it was all action. Here's what I want you to know today. Sexual purity is not an action. It's an outcome. Sexual purity, I need you to not think anymore and don't do this, don't do that. Stop thinking about the actions of sexuality. Stop thinking about having sex. Stop killing yourself over the guilt of that and everything else, and get away from action and start looking at outcome. And what I mean by it's an outcome is, it starts in your heart. It starts with looking at yourself and saying, God, I need you to purify me. I need you to clean up what is inside of me. God, I need to get this different inside of my heart because I need my actions to follow. And he wrote this psalm in 119. If we have that, can you throw that up? There it is. And he says, how can a young person stay on the path of purity? I would love to know, David. How can a young person stay on the path of purity? Because, Justin, you're saying that it's not an action, it's an outcome. So what does that look like to clean up my heart, to purify my heart, my life? He says, by living according to your word. And he's talking about Scripture. He's talking about the word, the words that God has given us, the truth that he's given us. To get away from the lies and all of that we hear every day and start living by the truth. And what God points to, what Jesus talks about in the Bible is love God with all your heart and love others as yourself. Having sex outside of marriage is not loving others as yourself. It's being very selfish. Engaging in sexuality that's very degrading to women and honestly degrading to men in some ways is not loving God and loving others. So even if you're not a Christian here today and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to love God and all of that, hey, love other people. Be a good human being. And he goes on to say, I seek you with all of my heart. Do not let me stray from your commands. And I think this is so important because in spiritual life, it's very easy to be like an EKG machine, that heart thing that goes boop, boop, boop. We have our highs, we have our lows. And we tend to, when things get slow and stuff like that, we tend to stop seeking God. We tend to get a little bit less curious. And I think curiosity is important in our relationship with God because it keeps our time with him less being about checking off boxes and more being about getting to know the person who created you. And when we do that, and we do that consistently, we tend to not wander or stray from God as far as we do sometimes. I know that's the frustration I had and some of you have. I can't stop doing this. I can't stop. I keep straying. David is saying, I'm going to tie myself to you, Lord, so I don't stray. He says, I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. So the last thing he says is, it's deep in me. It's in my heart. It's not an action thing that I've done. That's not what I'm going to try to change. This is a heart issue that I'm going to look at purifying in the inmost being of who I am. Now, I don't do this often because I think I like to be liked. So I don't oftentimes look at students and get real. But I'm not a crier either, so. I need some things to change because I want, when my daughters get to high school, I want them to have a chance. And the way things are headed, they don't have a chance not to do this well. So guys, stop scanning the rooftops. Like David that morning looking out over everything, maybe his intention wasn't to see somebody naked, but ours is. Stop scanning the rooftops. Stop looking through Instagram for that bikini picture. Stop looking through a girl's profile that you think is cool to see if she's posted something that you can look at. Do you know why girls will send you pictures and videos of themselves naked? Because we as men have done an awful job of communicating their value. And so now they feel like this is what you do. This is what love looks like. Now there's these insecurities that we've created and we hold against them. Now it's like, hey, you want to be with me? You want to date me? All these other girls are sending them. I need you to also, because this is what we do. Remember, guys, what enters through your eyes will exit through your actions. And it's a problem. It's a problem. Maybe you don't buy into the God thing. Maybe you don't care. I would tell you this. I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he made an excellent point. Be a good human being, okay? Be a good human being. Because to love somebody, to respect somebody, to appreciate somebody is going to be to honor the boundaries that they should place in their life. And if they don't have them, to challenge them to do that. To give them space to live this out. We give girls no space to live this out. We give them no space to practice sexual purity because we're so aggressive and we're so selfish. Please stop. Girls, stop walking around on the rooftops. All right? I know that it starts with us guys, and I know there's some serious insecurities in you. And you may not label it that, and you may not say it's that, and you may say it's not a big deal, but I've been around long enough. I see the purity of my little girl, and then I talk to high school students, and I think, what's lost from this innocence to here? You don't know what you're worth. And so what you do is you try to go get that worth. And you try to say, hey, I'm going to put this picture of me up because it feels good when people like it. It feels good when people comment on it. It feels good when guys are coming to me and I have the attention. Let me tell you this. If a guy is asking, if you're with a guy, the kind of guy who's asking you to send him videos and pictures, then he's the kind of guy that's going to share it with his friends. And trust me, you don't want that. You may feel like you want it. You may feel like, yeah, they're talking about how hot I am and this and that and everything. You don't want that. Because the farther you go down that path, the deeper the insecurity gets, the further you're going to go in your actions, and it will lead you to a terrible place. So I want girls also to challenge you this. If you've sent pictures, or if you are, or all of that, I want you to ask yourself, like we talked about last night, why? Why am I willing to do this? Why do I need to do this? Because I bet if you'd be vulnerable with yourself, with God, with your friends, whoever you're comfortable being vulnerable with, you're going to find some stuff in your life that needs attention. And while I can't fix the problem that us as men have created by devaluing you to the point where you feel like you have to do that, I can't fix that. Hopefully we can together. There is a creator in heaven who holds your value in his hand and wants to communicate that to you. Wants to say, hey, you don't have to do that. I can fulfill everything you've been longing for and chasing. I want to show you love like you've never known love before. And I won't require a single picture from you. I just want your heart. I would love it if we could talk about that, but if we could take that serious the rest of this week. I want you to think about it. Some of you will go out of here and be like, you know what? That talk wasn't good enough for me to stop looking at pictures or asking for them and stuff like that. And some of you will take it serious. And I hope that you do. Because in like 11 years, 12 years, my daughter's going to be in this seat. And I don't want this to even be an issue when we're thinking about what to talk about then. And that's going to start with you, not me. There's only so much I can do. That's in your hands. So I would just ask you, as a dad on Father's Day, let's take it serious. Let me pray, and then I've got one last thing. Heavenly Father, our identity was established when we were born. It's not something we have to build. It's not something we have to alter or manipulate. You've determined who we are in your eyes the day that we were born. And the world and the enemy has perverted that so much we feel like it's up to us, and it's just not. Would you remind us today that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, as David writes? God, don't let us buy into the cheap version of love that we know here on earth. But give us assurance every day that our Maker loves us unconditionally and fully. I pray for the men in this room that they'd have the courage to be the kind of men who can stand up to this and respect women and say, no, 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 no. I want to communicate my value to you in the way that I treat you, in the way that I think about you. And I'm going to choose to not look at things because I know it skews my perspective. And I pray for the girls. God, I hate the insecurities that we as men can create sometimes. I just pray for freedom for them. Would you give them freedom today and give them truth and allow them to live without that burden? We love you. Amen.